How can you simulate startup experiments with AI at zero cost? In this video, I will demonstrate my synthetic A/B experimenter, which is a free application that allows students and novice entrepreneurs to test out startup ideas with large language models. Welcome to the Gen AI Nerd Channel. Now, when I teach entrepreneurship, I always think it's crucial that I give my students a real experience about what it means to build a startup. And getting harsh feedback from customers is definitely part of this experience. However, in an educational setting, getting feedback from real customers is quite challenging because of time pressure and budget constraints. Therefore, I developed a new application where we use synthetic customers to engage in a A/B experience for startup ideas. And this application will allow students to compare different value propositions or different revenue streams and get instant feedback on their implications. So let's go to the application and let me show you step by step how you can use it. Yes, so here we are in my application, which is called the Synthetic A/B Experimenter. This is a Streamlit application, and you will find the link to the application in the YouTube description. So when you just click on the link, you will go into this kind of application. And so what are the things we need to do? First of all, here you can find a brief explanation about how it actually works, with also the necessary disclaimers that this is in the end creating synthetic output and not real output. The first thing you actually need to do is to give a CROC API key. And this is a kind of password that you need to give that will allow this application to talk with open source large language models. And in this way, this application is completely free. So let me first show you how you can easily get a CROC API key. So to get a CROC API key, we simply have to go to croc.com. And just to be clear, this has nothing to do with Croc from Elon Musk. This is another company. And then we can go to developers, and here we can ask to create a free API key. Now, I'm already logged in with my Google account, so you might then have to create a login. And then you can simply click on Create API Key, give it a name, and then you will get this long password that you can simply copy-paste in your application. So that's how you can easily get a CROC API key. That's the only technical thing you need to do. So now we are back into our application. And so now I will give my CROC API key here. So now I've given my CROC API key, and you can actually use different models based on CROC. So here I've now have the newest open source model of OpenAI. But if you want, you can also choose Llama models from Meta. But now let's use the OpenAI open source model. You can indicate the temperature. Now here, I would actually recommend to put it at 0 because we want to get quite deterministic answers of our synthetic respondents. Maximum tokens, 1024 is a good number. And this is for the randomization. I will explain that later on, but this is just kind of something that you can keep like it is. And in the end, we will ask questions to our respondents, our synthetic respondents. And here we have to indicate whether we want to use a Likert scale in their response or a binary answer. And if you use a Likert scale, you can choose here between different Likert scales, 5-point, 7-point, or 10 points. So these are the first things we need to indicate. And now I can go here to my application. And so what do we want to do here? Yeah, so we want to have two scenarios. And in this case, I will simply test two different value propositions. So I have two different value propositions, and I want to get feedback on which kind of value proposition triggers most enthusiasm with respondents. And so what we need to create is a kind of sample of respondents. And here we first of all have to kind of indicate some criteria. So what is the minimum age of my respondents? So 18 might make sense. Maximum, we can even make a bit bigger. And we have to give a geographical focus, so I can choose between Germany, Europe, or global. So now let me check Europe. And then I have to describe my target customer segment. And in this case, I will use two value propositions that want to solve the pain point of monitoring energy bills. Yeah, so people might struggle to monitor their energy bills, and I want to test out two startup ideas. And so here, as target customer segment, I will say people that rent an apartment. So these are the kind of people that I want as my target customer segment. So let's make sure that I don't have a typo. So this is my target customer segment. And here I can indicate how many respondents I want to create. Now, you can make that as big as you want. However, you have to take into account we are using here free models in Croc, and there are what is called rate limits. So that means there are some limits to the amount of tokens you can generate in a minute, in a day. And therefore, I would recommend you to not create an excessive sample. So here, for instance, we can start now with 50 people. That's already a reasonable sample to get some feedback. So we keep it to 50. And then here, I now need to enter my 2 scenarios. Yeah? And in this case, I simply want to add 2 value propositions so that we can do a kind of A/B experiment. Which of these 2 value propositions trigger most enthusiasm for customers? Now, I have here in ChatGPT actually asked ChatGPT to create for me some interesting value propositions to address the pain point of monitoring energy bills. I actually have a separate video on how you can really come up with creative value propositions using ChatGPT. So that's what I did here. And so here we find quite some creative value propositions. One, for instance, is an energy Tamagotchi, and another one is energy karma credits. And now I might want to test out which of these 2 ideas might trigger most excitement with potential customers. So now I can simply copy paste these options into my application. So let me do that. So this is the first one. So now I need to go back to my application, copy paste it into option 1. And then I can go for the second option. Let's take here the energy karma credits. So I will copy paste this one. So let me copy and paste it into my application. Yeah, so these are my 2 scenarios. And finally now I have to highlight which question do I want to ask my respondents. And so here we can ask something like, please answer how attractive this value proposition is for you. And we already indicated that we want to have this answer on a 5-point Likert scale. So that's already kind of modeled. So that's simply the question we want to do. And now we simply have to click on Run A/B Experiment, and then it will start running. And this will take quite some time. So the initial step is quite a straightforward step. So the initial step is that it actually creates for us a kind of random sample of respondents based on the demographics that we have provided. Yeah? So you will see it will randomly create ages, genders, and here we are in Europe, so non-binary is still allowed here. We have nationalities that are randomly created, and so then they belong to particular age categories. So now it created a random sample of 50 respondents. That's already finished. And now actually the system is creating for each single respondent an extensive persona description. Yeah? So for these 5 random people that have been generated, it's now actually creating a kind of persona description, a richer description of what this person is about. So that's what it's now generating. And you see we now briefly have to wait some time because now for every person, it's actually triggering an LLM to create a persona description. So let's briefly wait until it's finished. Okay, so now the second step has been finished, and you see we now receive a database with persona descriptions of my 50 people. So let me make it a bit more visible here. Then you can see kind of the descriptions that are generated. So here we have the persona. I'm a 20-year-old binary person from Slovenia living in a rented apartment, and so on and so on. And of course, now in all persona description, it will say that they're living in a rented apartment because that's the customer segment that I formulated. But so you can already see that in that way, the personas have been generated. So that's the second step that has been generated. And actually, immediately, it also generated then the answers to the both value propositions. Yeah? So each persona has been given the description of the startup, and it had to kind of give an answer on how enthusiastic it is about this value proposition. So that we can also see here in the database. So it actually gives an answer to each value proposition. Yeah? So you see a kind of written answer. But on top of that, there are also, like we demanded, they give a score on a scale of 1 to 5. Yeah? So, and you can already see some differences between both scenarios. So that's step 2, and then actually in step 3, it automatically engages in a statistical analysis for us to see, do we find significant differences between both scenarios? And in this case, and this is kind of the statistics that you need to know, there is indeed a statistical difference between the A option and the B option. We can also see that in the visual. So we see that on average, option B, the second scenario, is seen as more attractive than the first scenario. And this difference seems to be significant in our sample. And here we get even some additional analysis. So here we can look at how did females respond, and is there a significant difference between them? And you see actually that across genders, the significant difference seems to be present. And the same we can do for the age group. And finally, you can actually also download all the results. So now I can click here on download CSV, and then we will receive a CSV file. So let's briefly take a look at the CSV file. Yeah, so here we can see the CSV file where we get the age for each responder, their gender, nationality, age group, the persona description, the answers that they gave to both value propositions and their scores. And I think what is interesting is that you kind of get a reasoning and explanation for both scenarios of each respondent. Yeah? And I think more careful analysis of these respondents might actually give you a better understanding about the kind of features of your value proposition that might make sense, that actually increase the scores or decrease the scores. So that you could further analyze, also again with ChatGPT if you want. And of course, it's actually interesting that one single respondent has independently analyzed both options, the A option and the B option. So you could even do a kind of what we call within respondent analysis. So I actually think this gives quite some opportunities to do some interesting analyses. So I hope this showed clearly how you can use this application to do some A/B experiments. Of course, again, this is not replacing real experiments. I definitely think that you need to do that if you really want to test a startup idea, but at least it can give you some first valuable insights in how respondents are likely to act, to react to, for instance, two different value propositions. So especially, I think in an educational context, this can help students to quickly collect data that they subsequently can analyze, and based on that, draw some first conclusions. Okay, so I hope this can be helpful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me to exchange about the learnings with this tool. It would be great if you test it out with your own students, see if it works or not, because this is still quite experimental. But I hope by sharing this, we can really kind of push the knowledge with synthetic experiments in the setting of startups. So thanks for your attention, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.